grace and the love that does not leave. There is a unique quality to time in the Ozark Hills, a quality the hills themselves seem to enforce with quiet authority. The new century had arrived with all its noise and proclamation, but along the banks of Little Sugar Creek, where the sycamores leaned over the water and the mist rose in the early morning like the breath of some great sleeping animal, the year 1900 was very much like the year before it had been, and the year before that. Thomas Whitaker tended his land. Mary Whitaker kept her house. Their auburn-haired daughter Grace, who had navigated her 27 years on one leg, a wooden crutch and a pair of strong arms, moved through her days with the practiced ease of a person who has long since made peace with the shape of her life. It's in the nature of such peace that one doesn't notice it until something comes along to disturb it. The something that came was small at first, so small that Grace might have missed it entirely if she hadn't always watched her mother with the attentive love that children carry for the ones who have carried them. Mary moved a little more slowly through the kitchen. She sat in her rocker a little earlier each afternoon, and sometimes Grace would come in from the yard to find her asleep over her sewing basket, her chin tilted toward her chest and her hands still for once. Those hands that were never still. The garden, which Mary had always tended as if it were a member of the family, began to look neglected around its edges. The cough came, and after it came there was no more pretending that nothing was wrong. It was a foul, grinding thing, and it shook Mary's small frame in a way that was difficult to watch. It didn't come gently and leave gently. It came in fits, seizing hold of Mary and refusing to release her until she had given it everything she had. Sometimes, when it was finished and Mary turned away to collect herself, Grace could see small dark spots of blood in the corner of her mother's mouth. Mary would wipe them away quickly, the gesture so practiced and discreet that it was clear she'd been doing it for some time before Grace first noticed. It was the discretion that frightened Grace most because it meant her mother had known and had chosen not to say. Thomas wasn't a man who spoke of difficult things until he had thought them through to their conclusion. When he came to Grace one morning and told her that he and Mary were going to Pineville to see Dr. Fountain about the cough, he said it in a voice that was quiet and even, the way a man speaks when he's already done his grieving in private and must now get on with things. Grace nodded and said she would be fine, and she meant it, though fine is a word that covers a great deal of what it doesn't say. She spent that afternoon beside Little Sugar Creek, sitting on the flat rock she'd favored since she was a child, her crutch laid across her knees. The water moved over the stones in its bright, indifferent way. It wasn't long before Dewberry appeared, settling on Grace's knee with the lightness of something that weighs no more than a thought. The fairy said nothing for a long while, and Grace said nothing either. They watched the creek together in a silence that held more understanding than most conversations do. Grace didn't mention Pineville or the cough or the blood she'd seen at her mother's mouth. She didn't need to mention these things, for she could tell by the way Dewberry sat quietly with none of her usual bright chatter that Dewberry already knew. Thomas and Mary returned as the evening settled in the sky, going to the deep blue that comes just before dark in the Ozarks. Thomas said only that Dr. Fountain would write to a colleague in Springfield and they'd hear something in a week or so. Mary went inside, and the sounds of the house resumed as if nothing had changed, though everything had. The doctor's buggy came near the end of 3 weeks, the horse picking its way up the lane with the unhurried patience of an animal that's made many such visits. Grace waited outside while her parents spoke with Dr. Fountain inside. When he came out, he paused and looked at her with the special kindness that people reserve for those they feel they must be kind to. He said she'd grown into a beautiful young woman, and that she should take care of herself, the way a man says something when he wishes he had something more useful to offer. That night at supper, the three of them sat together in the lamplight, and for a time no one spoke at all. Then Mary put down her fork and looked at her daughter across the table with those clear, steady eyes that Grace had known since before she could remember knowing anything. And she said what she had to say. She said she had a cancer, that it was a bad one, that there wasn't a cure for it, and that she loved Grace more than she had words for, though she'd always loved her more than she had words for, so that part, at least, wasn't new. 2 months is a long time, and 2 months is no time at all. Mary kept to her bed under the old quilt she'd pieced together the winter before Grace was born, and Grace kept to the chair beside her crutch leaning against the footboard. She held her mother's hand. She watched her mother's face while she slept, learning every line of it with the desperate attention of someone who knows they're running out of time to learn. She wanted to carry the map of that face with her forever, to know where every road of it went. There came a spring morning that was beautiful in the way only spring mornings can be, when everything that was dead has come back, and the light looks as if it's never been used before. The birds were working with great industry in the yard, and the sky was a pure and simple blue. Grace woke in her chair and looked at the bed, and understood at once that the stillness in it was different from the stillness of sleep. It seemed wrong to her that the day should be so beautiful, and it seemed the world ought to have known and arranged itself accordingly. Mary was buried on the hill above the house, in the family plot among the old cedars, beside her sister Rosalind, whose stone had stood there long enough that the letters were worn soft. Thomas built her a good marker and set it well, the way a man does when he's got very little else he can do. The neighbors came with food, with their presents, and with their prayers. Then they went home, and the hill was quiet again. That evening, Grace made her way down to the creek. With only one leg, the going was slow over the uneven ground, but Grace had always managed uneven ground. She found her flat rock and settled onto it, listening to the water. Dewberry came quickly, as if she'd been waiting, and stood on the rock beside her, a small, bright figure in the fading light. "Sweet Grace," said Dewberry, in the voice she used when she meant every word, "you're now a woman and have seen so much of life. This, too, is part of life. You will, and must, grieve the passing of your dear mother, for the size of grief is only the size of the love that made it. She hasn't really gone, Grace, for as long as you keep her memory and the love shared between you alive in your heart, she'll be with you. She'll be in the garden in the spring. She'll be in the smell of the bread you bake and in the sound of this creek. She'll be in your own hands, because your hands learned kindness from her hands." Grace looked out at the water for a long while, the evening birds settling along the bank and the first stars showing themselves above the ridge, shy and tentative the way stars always are at the beginning of the night. "I know," she said at last, quietly, the way one says a thing that's both a sorrow and a comfort at the same time. "I know she is." The creek carried on over its stones in the Ozark dark, telling its long story to nobody special, the way it always had. The way it would, long after all of them were gone.